Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/369, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 369th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is the preview episode for the Oregon Coast Remix. So 10 years ago, almost exactly now, I embarked on one of my biggest adventures, and that was cycling the entire Pacific coast from Canadian border to Mexican border. Since then, I've revisited sections of that ride time and time again. You've heard them here. And to be honest, I have some habits, and they are tried and true places that I camp at, that I eat at, that I throw a few back at. You've heard them all here. So to celebrate 10 years of the pod, the Oregon coast makes a lot of sense, but celebrating the past sometimes means looking forward instead. So maybe we shake it up a bit and we remix this ride. On this episode, a preview of the 10th anniversary ride, the Oregon Coast Remix. So here we are. I am recording this prior to the ride because I think that that's a better way to do the preview episodes. I think that there was one time when I did it after the ride, and I think it's much better for you all to get a preview of the ride the way I intend to ride it, because as we all know, sometimes even the titles of the show don't make any sense after the ride kind of presents itself. So here we go. Here's what the ride is supposed to be, and it is a true remix. This is a bicycle ride from Lincoln City, Oregon to Crescent City, California. There's going to be a couple of fast forwards in between. There's going to be a Portland to Lincoln City fast forward, and then there's going to be a Port Orford to Crescent City fast forward. There is an outside shot that I could do a ride from Brookings to Crescent City, but at this point, I'm not banking on that just because timing, availability, etc. This will become more clear later on, but there's definitely a couple of fast forwards involved here. Everything in between those fast forwards, however, the intention is all cycling. The nice thing about this ride is it is reasonable mileage. There isn't a single day that's over 62 miles as planned, and that's by design. I'm really not wanting to bang out crazy miles. I will say the mileage isn't exactly what I'd call much less than normal, except for one particular day, and that's fine as far as I'm concerned. Here's how the remix is. Why is this different than any other Oregon Coast ride? I decided as I was designing all of this that I needed to mix it up, and how should I do that? Of course, I thought about starting further north than I normally do, and that was certainly an option. But as I was kind of messing around with different configurations to everything, I realized that I've always been staying at the same campsites, yet I knew for a fact that there were other hiker-biker options in the Oregon State Park system. There are also additional parks that are county-based parks. I've stayed at a few of them that are all up and down the Oregon coast, and those are options as well. So what I decided to do was I was going to try to do all brand new to me campsites each and every single night. And by doing that, that remixes the nature and the TikTok of the ride. So I'm no longer going to be staying at places that I know and love, well, except for one of them. Sunset Bay, but we'll get to that later. And that's going to change really everything, where I eat, where I stop, where I take breaks, where I end up doing some scenic vistas, all that other kind of stuff. All of them are going to be brand new to me except for one. And I'm going to get there in a little bit. The nature of the one that I was looking at just looks a little bit more than I really feel like dealing with. Although you never know, I might change my mind. We'll just have to kind of see. Again, more on that in a minute. So this, even though this is a familiar ride, like I said, the TikTok of it is absolutely totally different. So this is going to feel like a different kind of ride. There's going to be new challenges, new rhythms. There's going to be the ability to spend time in coastal towns differently. Most importantly, I will not be staying at Sunset Bay State Park, which is a gloriously beautiful place, but the hiker-biker spot there just is not good. And when I realized that I was going to be changing the rhythm of this ride, I finally realized that I'd finally be able to avoid going to that park altogether. And that made me very happy. And I think it'll make you all happy too, because I think it'll be all a little bit different. What are some of the cons here? And I'll get to more pros and cons in a little bit later. I mean, some obvious stuff. You know, every single time I stop and have a night at South Beach State Park south of Newport, I always end up saying this is the whole reason why I come here. This is the Oregon coast in a nutshell. I go to the Brewers on the Bay, the Rogue Brewing Company's fabulous little spot there at the foot of the Yaquina Bay Bridge. It's amazing. I'm missing out on that. I'm skipping it. I'm intentionally skipping that. I don't love that, but I know that I think that there's more possibilities for other things to maybe reveal themselves that maybe are better. Who knows? And I'm excited about that. Not exactly in proper bike shape for this ride. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. That's been a struggle for me this year, and I guess I've talked about it a little bit here in some of the touring. But yeah, not in the greatest of shape. I'm much heavier than I should be, and I think that's going to end up becoming noticeable for me in certain parts of the rides. I'm thinking about the Seven Devils in particular, because the Seven Devils, as I'll talk about in a moment, is not at the beginning of my day. It's going to be at the end of my day as I'm planning this. And that's going to be a little bit more tricky, especially that first big hill. Some more on that in a little bit. What are some unknowns? These hiker-biker campgrounds are certainly Oregon State Park campgrounds, the ones that I'm intending to go to at least. But are they any good? I mean, I know that there's at least one that I don't care for as much. I have no idea that the rest of these that I stay at could be not so great. So it's kind of... we're just going to have to see and find out. This, more than anything else, I've talked about the book, Cycling the Pacific Coast or whatever it is, the purple book. I'm not even sure if it's worth even mentioning the book anymore because I don't see it much anymore. 10 years ago, that was something that almost every cyclist had. Now, I think a lot of people don't even look at that particular book. It's also, on the older side, but that has a very specific rhythm to it. And with a couple of deviations, that's been my ride this whole time. I'm going to be breaking away from that quite a bit. They mention these other campgrounds in the book, but obviously don't highlight them very much because they recommend a very particular ride. And that very particular ride has served me very well through the last 10 years, but we're just going to have to see. So let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of this ride. I'm going to be starting in a good old Portland, Oregon, the land of sunshine and bunnies. For those of you who are uninitiated, that is what I refer to Portland as. And I'll be cycling from my brother's place to Union Station, Portland. He has moved, I believe I've mentioned this on past pods, he has moved to a different part of town than he was before. It's actually much more of a ride from where he lives now in Southeast Portland compared to when he was in Northeast Portland to get to Union Station. It's fine. There's actually a really wonderful urban greenway that you can take, and it's a really fun, great ride, but it takes longer and it's a few more miles, so I have to leave it just a touch earlier. I'll be taking the morning bus to Tillamook. It leaves around 11 o'clock or so from Union Station, and I've had great luck with this. This is the Northwest Connector bus. This is the one that it has just served me in great stead. The typical situation is there is a rack on the front, but the last time I went, if you followed last year's tour, it was broken because the bus had hit a deer. Sorry, deer, RIP. That didn't matter, though. We were able to stick my bike in the back, and it all worked out just fine. They can be very flexible on these buses that go out to the coast and the coastal buses themselves, which I really, really appreciate. It helps to make these things possible. So I was originally hoping that I would be able to ride once getting to Tillamook a couple of hours later to Pacific City and grabbing a bus from there to Lincoln City. But as I look at the timing of the next bus that goes to Lincoln City, which is where I'm going to be camping for that particular night, I only have about an hour. And that's just not really enough time to ride all the way to Pacific City. I conceivably could try, but I just don't think it's really realistic. And so the mileage really suggests that it's closer to a 2-hour ride. And I don't want to push myself that hard, especially for like a double time kind of a ride. I'm just going to stick around and maybe grab a bite to eat in Tillamook, which I never get to do, which is kind of nice. Another nice thing. And then I'll grab the bus from Tillamook all the way to Lincoln City. From there, we end up having a very short ride to my initial stop, which is going to be Devil's Lake Campground, and that's going to kick it all off. Never stayed at Devil's Lake. I've considered staying it on multiple occasions, but I'm really excited about that. The thing that's interesting about Devil's Lake is that it's quite literally in Lincoln City, one of the more busy, larger towns on the entire coast. So that's going to be an interesting experience. They do have a hiker-biker campsite. I suspect that it is very difficult to get a reservation there if you're not on a bike or otherwise a hiker, because it's obviously Lincoln City is a very popular place. So I'm super stoked about that, and that's going to be where we kick it off. And lots of different things that you can do in Lincoln City in terms of food and whatnot. There's, of course, grocery stores there, and that's where I'll probably begin my supply run for everything there. I'm not going to bother going through a bunch of well, maybe I should. Maybe, why don't we do this? I wasn't planning on doing it, but why don't I mention the campgrounds that I am considering staying at? Because, again, is this definitely going to be the spots that I stay at? I don't know. We'll have to see. So, as I mentioned, Devil's Lake State Park will be the first place. Some of these are actually state recreation areas, I should mention, but I don't recall which ones are which. The next idea is, of course, cycling through Newport, missing out on South Beach State Park, but ending up in Beachside State Park, which I've always gone past, usually in the morning past after staying a night in South Beach State Park. Looks nice. Beachside. Sounds good. Hiker-biker there. That's going to be a pretty reasonable day. Then the next one will be my highest mileage day, and it will also include some of the Oregon coast's toughest terrain. It'll be a 60-plus mile day to Umpqua Lighthouse State Park, and I'm kind of excited about that because I've gone there once just to see Umpqua Lighthouse, but now to stay there near Winchester Bay and to kind of hang out there, I'm normally kind of blowing through that town. There's a general store there where I'll pick up, a Gatorade or something like that. Well, now I get to stay there for the first time and see what Winchester is all about. There's also some county parks in that area that could be another possibility. The next day is a really interesting one because I'll be going to Bullard's Beach, which is the magical thing that allows me to skip Sunset Bay. That's really, really close to, not to Brookings, Oregon, but to Bandon, Oregon. Bandon, of course, is a kind of a fancier town that's along the Oregon coast there. And Bullard's Beach is really just north of town. So that's kind of interesting. But that's the one where that day, although it's a slightly lesser mileage day than the prior day, it includes the Seven Devils as the end of the day. And so that's going to be probably a fairly challenging kind of a thing, considering just, where I'm at fitness-wise. And then the final day will be nice because I'll hopefully get a chance to spend some time in Bandon in the morning. I am constantly just blowing through Bandon, and I never get a chance to actually see the town very well. I'd like to spend some time in there. I only have a 35-mile day to end up going through Port Orford. This is where we have an interesting spot because the idea was that I was originally going to be staying in Cape Blanco State Park. But as the more I've looked at it, the harder it seems to get to Cape Blanco. There is a hiker-biker campsite there, but it is a really windy, steep road to get to the top of it. Is it any worse than the Umpqua Lighthouse one? In the book, they suggest that it is, or they make it at least seem like it is. And so only a few miles on the other side of Port Orford is Humbug Mountain, a tried and true kind of a place, and also kind of one that I sort of like. It's a unique setup. Everybody kind of gets their own little tucked away little spot. I like the Humbug Mountain setup. It's kind of nice. And so that's kind of the idea that unless I'm really feeling like going up a big hill and trying out something new, unless I'm just really gung-ho to do that, I know that Humbug Mountain is there and is in the back pocket. Following that, it's just going to be a short ride to Port Orford. Either if I'm at Humbug Mountain, it's coming back up a big hill, by the way, because I remember there's this big, glorious, sweeping descent. And in some of the most beautiful, beautiful parts of the Oregon coast is this few miles right around the south side of Port Orford all the way to Humbug Mountain. I'll get to see that at a much slower rate if I'm coming back up the hill. to go back to Port Orford, but that's where I can catch the bus from good old Curry County Transit. A big thumbs up to them, man. They just do such a great ride in the southern part of the state. That'll get me down to Brookings, where, again, if I have time, and I think that the answer to this is just unfortunately no. I would love to be able to ride across the California border. I haven't done it in a while. It's kind of fun. It's a really easy riding. It's pretty flat. Actually, it's a little bit downgrade. It's a little bit of a downhill, so you can really get some good speed going on that part of the route. I just don't think that my ability to get to my car rental in time is there. And apparently they have now sold out of cars at the Crescent City Airport. And I'm just worried that if I don't show up on time for this car, I don't know why I'm feeling nervous about that, but if I show up a couple of hours late, I'm just concerned that they could give that car away. So I want to make sure that I get there, because here's the weird part. If I do take the bus to Crescent City, I could continue to take the bus. There's a series of buses, and we've done it before. We, meaning you've come along for the ride, that takes you to the Medford airport. It just made me violently car sick last time. And I didn't like it at all. So that's why I'm spending way too much money for a one-way car rental from Crescent City, California, all the way to Medford. And I'm going to drive myself, because I don't know about the rest of you who get motion sick. When I drive myself, I never get motion sick. Crazy. So if I don't get that car there, there is no other bus. There is no other option that day to get to Medford. My flight out of Medford leaves at 7 a.m. the next morning. There's no other options. So this just frankly has to work. From Medford, I'll have an overnight stay at a hotel, and then I will fly home from there, going through LA for anybody that cares. It doesn't really matter. So that's the route. I'm excited about that for sure. And as you can tell, it is a different bit of a TikTok if you compare it to other past rides. But the end of it, of course, is the Puke Avoidance Tour 2024, which I'm okay with. Stupid expensive car, but you know what? Sometimes you spend money on things too, and that's the reason. Let's talk a little bit about the gear for this particular trip. I'm going to be flying out the main touring bike, the Navarro Safari. And it is the same bike, technically, or at least the same frame that did the big 2014 coast to coast, or not coast to coast, Pacific Coast / border to border tour. And I was thinking about it recently because I just had it in on the shop, and I had some components swapped out and changed out because, you know, components and drivetrains and things like that, they wear out. I was trying to think how much of this bike is still the same. And the answer to that is actually very little. I was thinking, okay, I know the frame is the same. I know that that essentially all of the shifting components have all been swapped out now officially. I just had to finally say goodbye to the twist shifts that had deteriorated over these years. I do have all new components in just about everything else. The drivetrain has gone several times. The wheels, actually, as I think about this, I believe the rear wheel, I have to think about this. I'm not sure if the wheels are still the same. I think one of them may be new, but I think that they may both be originals. I'll have to check and see if I can kind of figure that out. The saddle is still the original saddle, which is crazy. I have it electric taped up and everything. I really should replace it at some point, but I don't know why. It's a very comfortable saddle. It's cheap, it's stock, it works for me. But very little else is all the same. But this bike is still largely, can we say it's largely? A lot of it is still the same bike that I did before. And that's special to me, and that's why I'm bringing this one out. I will need to, as I'm sitting here right now, try to get it out and ride it a little bit more. It didn't shift exactly right between the bike shop and here. It was not very far, but anytime I've had a bike serviced, sometimes it takes a little bit for the cables to kind of shift properly. It just takes a little bit of riding for it to kind of click in. So I'm hoping that it's okay. I don't want to mess around with it too much. I'm actually going to ride it the day before that I leave for at least a solid half hour or so and really go through the gears and make sure everything's okay. Maybe just something that some simple barrel adjusting can handle. But if something doesn't seem seem right, I'm not going to hesitate to bring it back to the shop, because I did have a lot done and it really should be perfect, to be perfectly honest. And I would like to make sure it is perfect as I take it apart and throw it into the dog's body bag, which of course may screw things up. But I've noticed that when I've used the dog's body bag, it actually has been perfectly fine. I do ship the bike upside down, and in that way, it's a little bit more stable. Of course, I do have to take the tires off and the wheel, not the tires, but the wheels off. I do protect the derailleur. I do protect a bunch of other things. I do the best I can. I'll probably use some cardboard on this and dispose of that, or recycle it, of course, in Portland. But it's worked very well. And I found when I've taken the bike out of the bag on the multiple occasions that I've ridden with it or used it through airlines, it's been fine. And that's been really pleasing. This is just a canvas bag basically, and it has worked. And I think it speaks a lot to how good Alaska Airlines has treated it over the years. I will be fully loaded. I'm going to be bringing a stove. I was originally thinking of not doing that, and then I thought, you know what? Emphasis on fun this trip. Emphasis on waking up on a cold morning, because they will be cold. I'll be waking up probably in the upper 40s or low 50s. And you know what? A nice hot cup of coffee sounds pretty good at that point. Maybe I'll do something fun, like I'll boil the water overnight and bring a thermos. Or maybe I'll just leave the thermos at home and not have the weight. I am fully loaded, but I would like to try my best to not bring as much weight. I am bringing plenty of weight on my own body at this point, and I would like to try to avoid all of that. So although I'm bringing a stove, I'm going to try to bring everything else, or limit as much as I can. And I'll talk more about that in a bit here. I'm going to be going with 2 rear panniers, the new blue Ortley back rollers. I guess they're not so new anymore. I've gone on a few trips with them. Here's the new setup. You experienced along with me the fork bags that I had for the C&O but slow trip. I really grew to enjoy the capacity on the front side of things, because what that does is I don't have a platform rack on that bike now. It pulls all of that weight lower, which is better, and I found that I enjoyed that more. And I have now basically a roll bag that's in a dry sack that is on my handlebars. I bought a new bag for that so that it fit a little bit better. It's longer, and I think will behave a little bit better on the front of my handlebars there. I will say, though, that I didn't like the skinny waterproof bags that came with those fork bags. And so I decided, and I may have mentioned this on the last tour, that it looks like that the Event dry bags that I have, and the ones that we can push out the air, would work really well on that, and they would cinch down really, really well. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, have I done it yet? Have I tried it yet? No, but I think it will work just fine, and I'll just, well, what could possibly go wrong, right? That way, what will happen is I have much more capacity on the front of my bike. And so I think that my rear panniers aren't going to be stuffed to the gills like they normally are. Now, one thing I'll mention here is that is a little worrying to me, because it's the closest thing that I've ever had to a 4-pannier style setup. Of course, they're not panniers on the front, but same idea. And that's a lot of capacity. I can carry a lot. And so what I'm going to try to do is to have a lot of empty air in all of these bags. Basically try to make sure that I'm not carrying so much. It's lots of capacity, though, so it's interesting, something that I can consider for if I do want to do a bigger ride where I do need to carry more things. That'll be there. But I don't think I will need to bring a lot. I'm going to try to keep the clothing to a minimum. I'm going to be basically bringing 2 changes of clothes for the riding, and, I'll wear them until they're a little bit too much, and then I'll stick them into a laundry bag and then wear the other ones. And then, I might be able to get away without doing laundry until I get to Medford. Or not. Or maybe I'll have to do it in Bandon. Who knows? We will see. But I would like to try to keep things to a minimum. The whole setup is probably going to look really heavy compared to what it is. I'm not going to be carrying any more on this quote unquote fully loaded ride than I ever have before. In fact, I'm hoping for it to be quite a bit less, but it might look pretty robust when all is said and done. But a lot of that is just going to be basically a lot of looking bags, or a lot of bags on it, even though they're not going to be terribly heavy, any individual one of them. Here are some of the challenges, and I have really kind of already covered these before. I'm not in the best shape of my life. I just haven't been able to get out very much. Of course, I did the C&O but slow ride. I feel like that, that one day where I banged out the 60 plus mile day, that of course had some big climbs at the end. I was fine, actually, when all was said and done with that. And that was when the bike was not behaving super well. So now that the bike's gone to the shop and I think things are a little bit more mechanically sound, it should be better. But I'm going to be doing a lot more climbing, and it's going to be a lot more of a robust ride on this. So, we're going to have to see. I've lost some weight since I first started weighing myself again. I don't know when you're carrying a few extra pounds, but I know that I try to avoid weighing myself then. Well, I finally got back on the saddle and literally when it comes to that, figuratively, I guess. And I've lost probably about 6 pounds since then. So that's good. It's not enough. I would like to lose a lot more, but you know what? It's fine. I'm just going to make do. I've been at this weight before. I've never ridden the Oregon coast at this weight before. So not great, but we'll make do. My usual stops won't make sense because my TikTok is different, as I keep saying. I'm going to be improvising a little bit more. I know where all the towns are, and of course I know what towns exist along the ride, but what are the grocery stores like? Some of them are easier to figure out than others. I've got one particular night where I think it's Reedsport, where I'm just not even sure where the grocery store is, because largely I'm not considering going to a grocery store at that point because it's usually further on down the road. But that's going to be the last call before one of my camping spots. I think that's the one near Winchester Bay, which also has another spot where I could get food much closer to the campsite. But, Reedsport's a little bit bigger, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's the kind of stuff that's going to make this for either a challenging element to the ride or making it possibly better, because maybe I'll discover new places to grab food or new places to hang out. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. It's a bit, I'll categorize it as a challenge, but maybe an opportunity as well. Upsides, again, I mentioned all of these as we've gone along here. Brand new campgrounds, new sights to see, new perspectives of the coast. Every time you end up having a campsite, that night, you've got an opportunity to see a brand new part of the coast. Sun doesn't set until about 8:30, 9 o'clock, probably, along the entire coast. I'm hoping to be in camp for hours, and maybe I'll get a chance to see a beach that I've never seen. Most of these places where these campgrounds are, I'm usually going by. I'm not checking them out. So I'm excited for a new perspective. And I think that that's going to make things for a better ride. The rhythm is going to be very different. It's going to be kind of almost like a brand new ride for me because I'm going to be lingering in different spots. I'm going to probably be blowing through spots that I normally linger in. So I think this is going to feel like a different ride. I'm in this for fun. I'm not in it for breaking speed records. I'm hoping to stop more. Tell me if you've heard this before. I'm hoping to stop more and enjoy things more. Take more breaks. Stop trying to bang out miles as much as I possibly can. That's what I'm hoping for. Will I do that? We'll see. I usually say that and don't do it. I'm going to try to actually do it more this time. And I think that I'm going to have to, because I think there's going to be a point where I'm sort of like, where am I again? Like, I'll know where I'm at, but not relative to where I'm going to be stopping. So I think I'm going to be forced to stop a little bit more often. Also, I think I'm going to be forced to stop because, frankly, I'm going to need to take more breaks. It just is what it is. One last little bit here on the upsides. I might have some surprises here. I'm not going to commit to anything at this point, but this is the 10th anniversary adventure after all. And if things work out, there might be some cool surprises. And if they aren't, I'll tell you what I was hoping they would be. But I'm hoping for a little fun surprise, at least here, that would be definitely impacting the pot. So that's it. That's the ride, the Oregon Coast Remixed. I'm really, really looking forward to this. I am taking a few weeks off from work, and this is going to represent about half of the time that I'm taking off. And I really kind of could use it. And so this is going to be a chance for me to really separate, to enjoy the fact that it's going to be cool temperatures right when the DC weather is really cranking up. The day that I leave will likely be one of those classic 95 degrees, 90% humidity kind of days that I just loathe. So I think I'm going to be doing this escape at precisely the right time. And I think it's going to serve me well. I think it's going to come across in the podcast. It's going to take over the better part of the summer. So it's going to be there for you every week, of course, minus our best ofs. And the tour journals start next week. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedal Shift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedal Shift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community. Expanding into live shows and covering new tours. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Bigel, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grotke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Lico, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCullough, John Hickman, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Michael Lazewski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponsella, Chad Reno, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, Lauren Allensmith, Eric Burns, Thomas Pearl, Darren McKibben, Richard Stewart, Dave Fletcher, Jack Smith, Luke Parkinson, Ryan Patterson, Sarus Faravar, John Gardner, Sam Scruggs, Dwight Pintinger, Connie Bowder, Rob Merrifield, and thanks to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.